Hello, everybody. Hello. I'm going to be that guy. My name is Adam Fletcher, and I'm here today from Seattle. I was born and raised in Alberta, Canada. And as a Canadian, I've had the privilege for the past 25 years of working in the States to explore, examine, build, grow, and work with young people in all kinds of capacities. I'm going to tell you two pieces of a story, but before I do that, I want to say thank you all for being here, and I want to acknowledge the privilege that I have for being here. This is a really great and honorable opportunity for me to even imagine that I have something to share with you all. I've got a chance to talk with a lot of you, and it's a very humbling thing, knowing your experience and some of your knowledge, and so thank you for that. Pushpesh, thank you for sharing the stage with me and for teaching me. I learned. I try to learn every now and then. It's a challenging thing when you have a head this big, but you work with it and hope for the best. I want to share with you two pieces of a story today. One piece is about my own experience, and the second piece is some of what I've learned. First, about my own experience. I was 14 years old. Actually, let's go back. Let's go way back. Isn't our work really based in who we are and what we do? That's really what I've begun to understand getting older and coming to this place in my life. My story goes way back, all the way back to even when I was born, and maybe even before that. Many of you have looked at your own lives in this sense. Let me tell you what I've seen in mine. My father was a Vietnam veteran. He went to the Vietnam War in the Marine Corps in the United States. He was a farm boy from Montana. Now, when you're a farm boy from Montana, that means a lot of things. It means that you're conservative. It means that you have those farm values. And it means that you really think you're tough. So he goes off to Vietnam, and he's really tough. This is in the middle of the 1960s. He wasn't a hippie. He didn't have long hair. He rode bulls, and he was a farm auctioneer. And he had this vision of himself being so tough. And he was so tough that he spent 3 tours in Vietnam as a Marine. That means that you were killing people all of the time and just doing these atrocious things that they did in that war. He went to sign up for a 4th time to go. And the Marine Corps said, "You can't come back, you're too weird." He was ravished by post-traumatic stress disorder for the rest of his life. This young man, when he was 21 years old. I was born to him 10 years after that, after he had traveled all around Canada and the United States trying to find his own home and his own experience. And when I was born in rural Alberta, Canada, I was born to a farm family, to people who were from the country. However, I never had a chance to experience that in earnest, just visited every now and then. My family's still there in Alberta today. But when I was a little kid, we didn't have a home, and we spent 10 years moving constantly. When you're in North America, a car is your home when you don't have one otherwise. And the car was our home, myself and my 3 brothers and sisters. After 10 years of growing up this way, we moved to the middle of the United States. We had lived in motels along the way, slept on the side of the road in our car, but we got to the middle of the United States to a little city called Omaha, right in the middle of Nebraska, right in the middle of the Midwest, right in the middle of North America. Omaha was a very homogeneous city, except for one neighborhood, one community. Every city in the United States is very segregated, racially, very segregated. There is very little integration in the United States still today, after all of these years of the civil rights struggle and otherwise. And Omaha had a very segregated African-American neighborhood. My parents, being rural people from Canada and from Montana, didn't really care about race, though. Unlike everybody else in the United States, it seems. They just didn't, it was irrelevant to them. So we ended up moving into this African-American neighborhood. And I had the chance to be a goofy white Canadian kid with a weird accent, wearing corduroy pants and cowboy boots, into my elementary school, where everybody else had Jerry curl and Air Jordan tennis shoes and parachute pants that were very snazzy. It was awkward. I've had the chance ever since then to face and confront my identities over and over again, which as a white male in the United States is pretty exceptional. We're not forced to do that. Apparently we've built a whole society based on white supremacy and using racism as a bludgeon to make other people do what we want. I haven't had that luxury though. Instead, I barely got out of high school on time. I'm the only one of my siblings who graduated from high school. And when I went off to college, it wasn't because that was what you were supposed to do. I went off to college because I watched television. There was a television show called Family Ties with a character called Alex P. Keaton. And that was my role model for going to college. It was a TV character. And when I got there, I had no idea what I was doing. Luckily, I have a big mouth, and that allowed me to succeed in college. But it took 7 years. When I got done with my bachelor's degree, I ran into graduate work because that was beginning to get exciting. That's where I learned about educational leadership and policy studies and began to do the studies and do the things. But in those years in between, I found my calling, I found my journey, I found the path that worked for me. And that's when I was 14 is when it started. One day I'm sitting at home. My mother was a social worker in my neighborhood. She put together tutoring and mentoring programs for the kids in the neighborhood to have safe places after school and on the weekends and in the summertime. And she invited one of her co-workers to come to our house one day. This man, his name was Edu Mahili. Edu was 6 feet 4 inches tall, very tall. And Edu came to my house. My little sisters knew him, but I didn't. Edu was an African American, and when he walked down the street, it was just like Sesame Street. The kids came running up to him to greet him, and they were so excited about him. And my little sisters were some of those kids. And so when he came to my house, he said, "Adam, I want you to work with me this summer." And I said, "What do you mean, work with you?" I had thrown newspapers before that, and that was it. He said, "I want you to come and help me teach this summer." I said, "Teach? What do you teach?" He said, "Drama." I said, "I don't know anything about drama." He says, "Of course you do. You're a teenager." So for the next 3 summers, I worked with Edu Mahili as he took theater to the public housing projects in Omaha, Nebraska. Edu and I went into these different projects, and the programs gave voice to the voiceless. It did the things that we know how to do. It turns out Augusto Boal from Brazil with the Theater of the Oppressed. Augusto Boal had a summer program in Omaha, Nebraska, where he taught educators from across the nation and around the world about the Theater of the Oppressed. And it turns out that Edu Mahili, who was my mentor, was a co-conspirator with Augusto to develop these workshops. And Edu was using these programs to build this theory out and to really understand it himself. After 3 summers, I knew that I wanted to grow up and become just like Edu. Okay, so I've come to accept that I'm never going to be 6'4", and I'm never going to be African American, no matter how hard I try. However, next summer I'm going to grow out my dreadlocks as long as his, and I'll show them. That's a cheesy speech line. I got to give it every now and then. I kept going after that, though. After those 3 summers, I didn't know that youth work was a career, and actually in the United States, it still isn't a career. It's a piecemeal job that people put together by luck. There is no university program where you can get a degree. That's not a thing. But I tried. I struggled. I made it. And when you do youth work, many of you know, you don't get paid well. And you end up moving from job to job or working several jobs at the same time. And so I did that over and over and over. I looked for opportunities to reach into the hearts and minds of young people and share with them just that little bit of power and authority that I had gained from that first program, from that first opportunity to teach young people about their own power and place in the world. And I used that as my sniff test from then on. How can I teach young people about their power, place, and purpose in the world, for themselves and for society? Well, fast forward. Eventually, I worked for a state education agency as a student engagement researcher, and I put together a project, and I looked at 3,500 examples where young people had said, "This is when school matters to me. This is when society accepts me. This is when I feel like I have power." Along the way, I started to see some patterns emerge, and I've written books about those patterns since then, and I've given 100 conference speeches and dozens of workshops to youth workers and educators across North America focused on these different things that I have found. I want to share with you one of the models that I found, Just one, I promise. If you're a person who takes notes, this is a chance for you to take a note. Take out a piece of paper and draw 4 boxes on that piece of paper. Pretend that these are square. Okay, 4 boxes, 1 in each corner. Make them big enough to write inside or around. This is a model of perspectives, of ways that we see others. I'm going to use the example of youth and adults. You can interpret it however it fits best for you in your scenario. The first way that youth and adults see each other, I'm going to draw a Y in this corner, and I'm going to draw an A in this corner. So from left to right on the bottom, a Y and an A. And then I'm going to draw a line in between them. And this first perspective, how do youth and adults see each other? Apathy. You all know what apathy is. Can somebody define apathy for me? Anything else? Apathy.
Indifference.
Indifference, don't care. So we get this idea, apathy, just disregard. And young people and adults disregard each other, and that's apathy. Easy enough. The next one that I want you to do is write an A at the top in the middle and a Y at the bottom in the middle, and then put a line in between them. And this one is pity. Now you can define pity in a lot of ways. I'm going to say that pity is giving something to someone whether or not they want or need it. You've decided they want or need it, and so you are going to give it to them. This is how most of our formal education is structured. We know what's best for them, and we're going to give it to them whether or not they want or need it. The next perspective that I want to share with you has an A in the upper corner, and then in the opposite corner has the Y. And this word that I'm going to put here is sympathy. With pity, you can say that it's being done to, do to others. As in, I'm going to do this to you. With sympathy, we can say that you are going to do for others. I'm going to do this for you. You begin to recognize they have a need, and you're going to do it for them. So get the difference between pity and sympathy. Pity is doing it to whether or not they need it. Sympathy is doing it for because you perceive a need. So the next box, the next perspective, changes again. We have A for adults in the middle on the left, and on the right we have Y for youth, right in the middle. If this was a 3D box, this line in the middle would actually be like a conveyor belt. Because this box represents empathy. And empathy is doing with. So do to, do for, do with. So the last one goes right in the middle, and it's a circle. And that circle looks like a yin and yang with that curvy line down the middle. Except on one side we're going to put an A, on the other side we're going to put a Y, and we're going to call this box, this circle, solidarity. And solidarity is when you can't differentiate from one or the other, when they appear the same. So I presented this model, like I said, a lot of times, and I've written about it, and it's been fun. But one of the things that is always held back to me, here, let's take a look. One of the things that's always presented back to me by folks is the reality that in our work, no matter what you do with community building, community organizing, community development, no matter how you look at it, that A and that Y can be traded for so many other letters. If you're a parent and have children, you understand what I'm talking about. Because our perspective of our children drives what we do with them. If you are in a committed relationship with another person, you might put P and P, partner and partner. Because our perspective of how we relate to the other person drives how we treat and what we do with them. If you're an educator, you could put a T and an S for teacher and student. If you're a police person, you could put police and constituents. If you're a politician, you could put voter and politician. If you're a clerk at a store, You can put C and C for clerk and customer, because our perspectives drive our actions. So that's what I want to share with you today, is this challenge that you take a look at your perspectives and how it affects how you relate to people. I also want to share with you this other unique piece about perspective. There are two things that are stopping all of our youth work of any kind from being effective. And you've heard of at least one of them, maybe. Apparently, this is a conversation in the United Kingdom. Has anybody here ever heard of ephobiphobia before? No. Anybody at all? All right, so phobia. Fear of the young. Ephobiphobia, fear of the young. Now that sounds radical, that's extreme. But if you think about it, who wants to live around young people? Oh my God, they're so loud. And their music and the way that they dress and what they're doing with their hair, oh my goodness. So ephobiphobia, it's out there. It affects libraries a lot. Apparently it drives some social organizations from excluding youth, etc. But I want to give you this other word, because I think this one is a little bit more interesting. This word is adultism. Now, let's differentiate adultism from its peers. Adultism is to youth what heterosexism is to GBLTQ people. Adultism is bias towards adults. Bias towards adults. Now, what's the consequence of bias towards adults? Discrimination against youth. However, is adultism always wrong? This is where I get in trouble in the States a lot of the times, because everybody thinks that adultism is always wrong. We have to let the children run wild. And we all know that's inaccurate. If there's a fire in the building, I'm not going to ask young people to vote on how we're going to get out. I'm probably just going to grab them by the scruff and pull them out the building, because the building's burning down. But the problem in all of our work, whether it's education or community development or beyond, is that we always act like the building is always on fire. And we always justify why we don't have youth involved. Our perspectives drive our actions. Our actions are reflected by the outcomes. The two questions that I want to leave you with today. One is, where would you situate your work in general? If you had to overly generalize everything that you've ever done, do you take a pitiful perspective on the people that you've worked with? Do you work in solidarity? Or do you struggle to have sympathy with the people who you serve? Whether you're an educator, a community organizer, or otherwise. Which perspective do you have in your work? And the second question is, how are you biased towards adults right now? Even in this moment, how are you biased towards adults? My name's Adam Fletcher. Thanks for having me.